welcome everybody. I was telling you about Salila. Salila is an Ayurvedic practitioner living in California, USA, but having her roots in Kerala, India. And today we will be talking about yoga practice and Ayurvedic food. We've been hearing about yoga and its benefits for a very long time now, and we're pretty much aware that yoga does good to us. But only off late that we're slowly realizing that food is an important part of the practice as well. And we are trying to now look at what are the information we have around food and yoga practice. Of course, food for health itself is a big topic.
Yes.
But since most of our practitioners are practicing yoga and they might be interested in food as related to yoga practice, and we might even have a few questions for you on food in general.
Right.
So to start out, how did your interest in Ayurveda begin, Salila? I mean, how did you start exploring different principles and practices of Ayurveda?
First of all, thank you so much for having me over. Such a pleasure to be part of, add my energies to the Shwasa endeavor. You guys are doing great work. It's wonderful to see how it's flourishing and is building its name in the world. My journey with Ayurveda, I would say, begins with my grandparents, my parents, because I come from an Ayurvedic lineage. So a lot of things were practiced within the family, a lot of unique ways of patya, apatya, of taking care of each other through sickness and through health. And I just thought that it was normal as every other family till I became extremely sick in 2015 and returned to India and healed myself through Panchakarma. And then my parents shared with me our roots and the stories of our grandparents, and that just, it was like, windows flung open in my head. And I was like, this is what I need. And during the pandemic, I felt a deep connection to my great grandmother, who was a Ayurvedic Vaidya, even though women never got that traditional Vaidya title, but she lived and worked as a man. She traveled and she took care of people. She lived an uncompromising life. So she became front and center for me. Her way of living became front and center for me. And that is how I then expanded myself, studied, and am practicing as a health coach, not as a practitioner or a Vaidya, but as a health coach, because I have a degree in diet. I'm a trained chef. And this is something that what I share is what I know through family traditions. So that is the long-winded story about how I came into it. And talking about food, food is foundational for anything, right? If our life is like a movie, then food is the soundtrack that plays in the background. And if the soundtrack is off, everything is off. It's not fun to be in that movie, to be in that theater. And for yogis especially, there is a robust yogic food culture. However, yoga leads to vairagya, whereas Ayurveda leads to rasa, to juice, to deeper, better, more meaningful, intimate relationships and a purpose in the world, moksha. However, keeping in balance that vairagya is not the way. Vairagya is the completely opposite direction. So food for a yogi living in the world, someone like you, running a corporation, having family, then that food becomes extremely important, that it is not creating vairagya in you, it is creating more rasa in you.
Very interesting thought. This seems like we will have to look at a fine balance between the two, because what you said about yoga and yoga's goal and Ayurvedic goal seems to be diverging, but I think there is a a place where they
Meeting
meet,
point.
they overlap. And yeah, I think that's something that's very interesting. So we'll talk about that a little more. For those
Absolutely.
of you who joined us while after we started, welcome to shwasa.com. And we are having a conversation on yoga and Ayurveda. And if you've been practicing yoga, this question would be, very obvious. So what kind of food should a yogi eat? What is said in the yoga text and what is said in the Ayurvedic text? So if you could show some light on this particular topic on, if you're a yoga practitioner, what is the kind of food you should be eating?
Mm-hmm. So when we say a yoga practitioner, what we mean in the real world sense is someone who is using yoga as a tool for health, for serenity of the mind, perhaps 45 minutes to an hour a day. So that's very different from the traditional sense of being a yogi who has left the world and now his body is a energy efficient car that he must fuel with as little fuel as possible so he can rise his energies upwards towards God. So that is very different from a yoga practitioner today who's simply using yoga as one of the tools from their toolkit to have a better life. So then Ayurvedic food comes into play there as the foundational bedrock that is supportive of anything that individual wants to do with their life, be it yoga, be it becoming a triathlete, be it head of a corporation like yourself, a dancer, a professional, someone who jet sets around the world. So then that is the bedrock that allows for all these expressions of how this human being wants to show up in the world. So I would say as long as somebody is following basic Ayurvedic principles that helps them have a healthy mind, body, and a connection with their spirit, then they can practice anything they wish to.
Oh, that's nice. Once again, we have people joining us and welcome you all. We would also like to have your thoughts on whatever questions we are talking about. Maybe we will pick it up now or maybe later, just to keep the conversation going. I don't want it to be a one-sided, we two talking and then people listening. So please share anything that you feel about any particular question we are having. Arunima says, what are these basic Ayurvedic rules for food? Okay, probably we should take up that question. What are these basic, rules?
So it is a wide ocean. It is a wide ocean of rules, but some things that we can start off to begin with is, am I eating seasonally? Am I eating organically? Was my food produced in a way that did not destroy the soil? Am I eating according to what my vocation is, what my energy requirement for the day is? Am I eating based on how my grandparents cooked? So these are all some basic rules to start, and then the journey continues. And then we have all these speed breakers and the lane markers to keep us on track. So we're not veering off into all kinds of weird fads. So if we begin from there, and if we are confused, all we need to do is, how did my grandmother eat? What did my grandmother cook? And what was my grandmother's profession? So if whatever my grandmother's profession was, if I'm doing the same thing, then the way she cooked, the quantity she cooked, the way she did patya apatya for health and sickness, the way she did seasonal changes with the food, all that will work great for me. However, if my profession is I am an IT professional and my grandma was, let's say, a laborer, I cannot eat the portions that she ate and then say that, oh no, Ayurvedic food isn't working out for me.
Yeah.
Also, another thing that comes to play here is a lot of India went through intense deprivation by the time we gained independence 75 years ago. Our life expectancy was 28 years. From there, wonderful people here in the West who are living very affluent, wealthy lives, still carry remnants of that deprivation diet. There is no need for that. So again, looking at traditional diet, but with the lens of how did my family make adaptations when there was poverty in the family, and how can I now learn to have an abundant life with this new lifestyle that I have, which is healthy. So cutting down on carbs, this is something that we Indians do a lot. You know, my grandfather ate 3 bowls of rice. I'm also going to eat the 3 bowls of rice. No, you're a yogi now. What's more important for you is you have the 5 to 8 vegetables, the 2 to 3 fruit, the handful of nuts, the 3 tablespoons of good healthy fats, and the spices and teas that you will drink all day through. That is what's going to keep you healthy. So for a yogi, not necessary to have 3 meals a day. One good full meal, including everything I spoke about, will be perfect for a yogi.
Okay, I mean, I know what I hear from you, Salila, is that this is not a change that we can bring about in a matter of days or weeks, or just listening to a talk or reading a book. It obviously is going to be quite a journey just with food, just making those changes, just figuring out what's the best kind of food that suits you. Like you mentioned, the seasons, the vocation you're doing, the kind of physical labor or mental effort that you put in to figure out what's the right kind of food and what food is available around me itself is going to take quite a bit of a journey, right?
Yeah.
At least a few years, I would say.
Totally.
So my question to you is, how do we start out on this journey? We have to start somewhere. And so what would be a best way for us to start out on this journey?
The first thing to understand is that Indian traditional cuisine is standing tall on the foundations of Ayurveda already. Many of the traditional cuisines of regions that had Hinduism or Buddhism are already standing tall on Ayurvedic principles. So developing trust, complete trust in our traditional wisdom, the wisdom of our acharyas, that the instructions and the guidelines have trickled through millennia, generations, multitudes of generations, to have trust in that. So again, going back to our grandparents' cuisine, because the grandparents have given us the blueprint to digest the food that we can eat today. So if I'm living in America, eating acai berries and avocados is not going to do me as good as eating coconut during summers.
Makes sense. And also to a following question to this, obviously now you're living in a different geography. How do you adapt? Like you said, if you should be eating a certain food that your grandparents were eating, but now you're in a different geography. And how do we make sense of this? And how do we even figure out what should we continue of our ancestral food?
Definitely, we have to think about the seasonal variations and then try to adapt foods from similar areas within India. So a lot of my food is North Indian style because the Terai region, the Himalayan region. You know why? Because it's always cold in California. So I have a very interesting reel on my Instagram account where I give a very short test, a quiz, to figure out how to use each food based on seasonal availability, based on geographical distribution, and our own heritage. So I can put that in my stories. That'll be a very quick way to look at a food and make an assessment. How often should I be eating this? As always, we should be eating foods that we have grown up on 70% of the time. 30% of the time, we can do experimentations, eat Middle Eastern and Japanese and Korean and fusion. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Obviously, there is going to be quite a bit of assessment before we start picking even our own ancestral food. Makes total sense, especially now that we are globalized and we travel a lot and also short stays in different geographies. And so I think it's not a very straightforward solution. I would say. Also, like our audience to interact. Please share any questions, any thoughts that you have. I can read that out. Sharma Aarti has just joined. Welcome, Aarti. Who else? Pandalaman joined. I'm sorry, I'm not able to recognize his names. But yes, to continue our conversation, we're having a conversation on yoga practice and Ayurvedic food. We also will extend our conversation to food in general for health. And the modern day, there is quite a bit of new age food ideas, and some we call fad, and some could be useful. And also, amidst all this, we also have Ayurveda. Oh, we hear about Ayurvedic food. Now, how do a beginner who's probably not really read much about Ayurveda differentiate? And is there a difference among all these new methods of how you consume food, new principles on nutrition? How do we even figure out amidst all of this happening around us?
Yeah, I have to again come back to the boring answer of let's go back to our grandparents. Did they do this? Did they eat this? There are many fads around these days. The one that I see among yogis is the sattvic food fad. Starting your day with a big bowl of vegetables and fruit chopped up together with nuts. So many people come to me because they have vata imbalances because of that. They are ruining their digestion because of that. Another fad that I see is waking up and drinking a big glass of water stored in a copper cup. That is not how our grandparents did it. We do achamana, which is a few handfuls of water, just a small quantity, like a little Japanese teacup. That's the amount of warm water you drink first thing in the morning, not a giant big tumbler full of water. Then the other thing I see is the smoothie fad. Toss in everything, milk, veggies, fruit, and toss in some protein powders. If it's going to sit in your tummy like a dense glob, it's not helping. So the other key way to find out if something is working or not working is to become very tuned to your own body, to become completely attuned to the sensations rising out of the body itself. Our instincts, especially for yogis who are constantly in self-inquiry, constantly watching our thoughts, constantly in touch with the body. What the yogis have done is, through practice, they have honed in on the ability to stay tuned to what is arising, right? So when we see a food and everybody's like, oh my gosh, this is a superfood, you've got to have it. And your instinct is saying, no, not for me, step away. If you drink a smoothie and the first few mouthfuls are making you gag, even though everybody else is like, my God, this is the best thing ever, stop. So again, there are the two keys. One, grandparents, and second, our own physical experience of how our body is digesting that food.
Makes sense. I have a follow-up question on that. Even before I ask you that, once again, I welcome all of you. A few people are joining us. Abhishek has just joined.
That's my cousin.
Abhishek Pati. Okay. Sangeeta, welcome. Viju, welcome. Viju is following us. At Shwasa, we run 100% online live classes. We have several classes in a day, 60-minute classes each, and there will be a teacher who will be watching you and guiding you throughout the practice. And as part of the International Day of Yoga, we are running these series of lives on various topics related to yoga and yoga as well, food, lifestyle, Ayurveda. And so this is one such talk we are having. And I welcome you all again. So my question related to, you said, one was the ancestral foods. Second part was how I connect to the food and how my body is responding to food, right? You said if I, even though others may seem to be enjoying, but if my body is not enjoying, if I'm not able to drink that smoothie, I should stop. So which means there's quite a bit of assessment that has to be done through our senses and our physical body. For that matter, we'll also have to be connected to the body, which is what you said. To be connected to ourselves much closely will help us choose the food, which also means one other part comes to my mind, that at some point, it's not always about depending on an external expert. because you're using the tools that you already have to pick the right kind of food. I know this is really interesting. I want you to probably share a little more on how this happens, how an individual all by themselves, the tools that they have, goes on to learn to choose food that's good for them. And maybe with some examples, rather than always reading a book or listening to an expert. I mean, even though that is important initially, that is important to have that foundation, right? Have an expert talk about it before you simply experiment. But I'm saying over a period of time, it seems like it is more of a freedom, just like yoga is, yoga gives you freedom.
Absolutely.
So I would like you to talk a little bit about that, Salila.
Yes, so sovereignty, complete. What is the Sanskrit word? It's not coming to my mind. Where you're completely centered in yourself. You know that this is what is right for you. I'm sure there's like 5 different terms for it in Sanskrit.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so
Sthiti is where you're established. I mean, in that,
right.
Stable state. But yeah,
I'm
sure you have other words than sthiti. Yeah.
Yeah, so we are in that state of stability, and from there arises intuition to know what is good for me, what is right for me, what is being projected on me to sway me off my path, and then retaliate that with energy and completely staying stable and centered. So, see, food is a large ocean of a subject. How does a baby learn to eat? How does a baby learn to trust food? The way the mother lovingly feeds the baby. If the mother has lovingly fed the baby things according to the baby's instincts, I have a child, she's 12 years old. I have gone against her instincts at times, and I have forced her to eat something because I thought it was healthy. She has thrown up afterwards. And that has taught me that all children are born with that's samasthiti, that sthirata within them, of surety that they know this is what my corporal body wants, needs, and will be nourished by. And they have an instinctual understanding, a deep instinctual understanding of hunger, thirst, fullness, and nourishment. These are the 4 aspects of food: hunger, thirst, fullness, nourishment. When we are intuitively eating, when we are sthira in that intuition of ours, we know exactly what things we put in our mouth. Is it fulfilling my hunger, my thirst? Is it fulfilling my nourishment needs? And is it, light on my stomach? Is this good for me, right? Am I full? Should I stop now? So I think it is in childhood that a mother lays this framework of sthirata, of samasthiti, of complete trust in oneself. And a lot of people who I see are confused are probably the force-fed children, probably the well-meaning mothers, the gateways to help, the gateway to hell, right? Good intention, paid with good intentions, right? Completely thrown you off. Now you have to reparent yourself, bring yourself back to that place where you can absolutely trust your intuition.
Yeah, thank you, Salila, about that. Since the pandemic, obviously, the very important or popular question is going to be about immunity, and of course, food plays an important role in immunity. So, what do we get to hear about immunity, food for immunity in Ayurveda?
Yes, so food for immunity again has 2 aspects. One is our body can produce its immunity. It can shut the gates on all pathogens and take care of wear and tear beautifully if we fed our stomach what we can digest properly. So someone with great digestion, having a light meal, the vegetable, the fruit and all that, having a light meal that their body is able to digest, will have higher immunity than someone who is constantly constipated, has diarrhea, but he's drinking turmeric, is eating giloy, is eating ashwagandha. That person is suffering. That person's body is not a good, efficient, energy efficient machine. It's the person who may be poor, who does not have all that fancy supplements and superfoods, but he's eating plain khichdi, but he's happy, his body is digesting, he's sleeping deeply for 8 hours. That individual has a higher immunity. So we have to again look at what can my body handle, what can it digest, eat accordingly. First step to immunity.
So
then we can add our tulsis, the giloys, the ashwagandha.
Okay. So it's not so much of the external elements, even though they have certain medicinal value, but it's also what is appropriate for your body based on your appetite, your metabolism, like you mentioned,
Yes.
What agrees to you is more important, you're saying, as against simply going by, the marketplace hype around tulsi or what. I mean, even though it's fantastic, I think
it's great.
I know.
Yes.
But
yes.
when to have it, how much to have it, and I think those would be based on individuals and their own ability to digest and their metabolic rate and so many other factors.
Yeah, once you're in that samasthiti, that sthirata, follow your joy. If you're looking at tulsi and you're like, oh my gosh, I want to have a nice cup of tulsi chai, go for it. Now it's going to be good for you.
Yeah. Nice. Again, a few people are joining us. Namaste Yogis just joined us. We should open up for questions from the audience. They've been pretty patient so far. So please go ahead.
I saw a few passing by. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I don't want to touch it because I don't want to break anything right now.
Let me see if I can read. Any questions? Anybody? Sandhya, welcome. Sandhya Mall. Colored Lioness, love Tulsi. Yeah, we all love Tulsi. Any questions from our audience? Please put it out there. I'll read out. Does food change at different ages?
Absolutely.
Question from Arunima.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. When we were babies, we did not eat what we are eating at 20s. And as a 70-year-old, shouldn't be eating like a 20-year-old, the food has to get lighter as we age. So more grains, more soupy meals, more fruits, more easily digestible things as the body ages. As the body ages, vata starts to increase. So then more unctuous, more good fats, more sesame, more ghee.
Yeah, I think that those things make sense. I think once you know the principles of Ayurveda, I'm sure these seems to be quite obvious. I think this is something that you would come up with by yourself when you know the exact principles of Ayurveda. So I'm sure that would be important. There's one more question. Janvi is saying calcium for vegan children, please. Oh, sorry, Janvi, you asked that earlier. We couldn't interrupt, but yeah, here we go. Calcium for vegan children. Someone is following vegan food at home, and the children at that particular household, what could be a source of calcium?
Well, milk is the source of calcium. So when we say that let's replace milk with all kinds of milk substitutes, then we are not doing the right thing. The body will make the calcium it needs from all the other foods. There's calcium in almost everything, just not at the higher percentage as milk. Okay. So if we are eating a good balanced meal with nuts, with children, vegan children have to have 2 to 3 fruit a day, have to have 5 to 6 vegetables a day. We have to create those mixed veggie curries every day for them. They have to have a handful of nuts. They have to have some probiotic like the kimchi. They have to have fermented batters on a daily basis so their body can assimilate and draw all the nourishment that they need from these plant sources. They don't have to drink milk.
Fantastic. I think that makes sense. For us, it's for most of us at least, we only know a certain food that are high in a certain, say, vitamin or mineral, and we think we get it only from that particular food, like milk is the only source of good calcium. Maybe there are a lot of others, like you mentioned. Maybe it's
leafy
not
vegetables.
Yeah, there could be leafy vegetables that also has calcium, apart from iron, that we know that, greens are fantastic for iron, but iron could be found in other food as well, is what you're saying. And a balanced diet is how you could make up for the calcium. So it's not necessary that so because this particular household is vegan, so obviously they're not going to drink milk, and so then they need not miss out on calcium, is what you're saying. You know, it has to be a wholesome food, and that will take care. I think that's a very interesting and very useful principle that we should have in mind. Let's see if you have more questions. Shushu, Dr. Shushu joined us. Welcome. Any questions, please? We are reading
We had a
your
few.
comments.
We had a few questions at the beginning. There were quite a few.
Yeah, they were rolling up. If you could send it out in the comment section. Questions? No questions in the question section.
Somebody was asking me for my name, so I just want to tell my name. My name is Salila.
Salila is from living in California. She's not from California. I've said she's living in California. She's from Kerala, India. At least has her roots in Kerala, India. And she's. You used the word Ayurvedic.
Health.
Sorry?
I'm sorry. We kind of missed each other.
Okay.
Yes.
Could you mention the best food for each dosha?
Okay.
Three doshas of Ayurveda, and could you mention best food for them? Maybe quick.
Yes. So, see, Ayurvedic doshas, the three doshas are Vata, Pitta, Kapha. Vata is the dosha of, the wind energy, the air energy, air and space going out of imbalance. Pitta is the fire and water going out of balance, and Kapha is earth and water going out of balance. So there is no real food that you can say will bring back Vata to balance, or bring back Pitta to balance, or bring back Kapha to balance. But here are three things that will bring them back to balance. If Vata is really high, then ghee or oil, sesame for vegans, and sugar or jaggery, sweet, will ground and bring it back to balance. So having a tea with some sweetening will help bring down Vata. Now, if Pitta is out of balance, our fire energy is out of balance. What brings that down is something cooling. So something like, again, ghee, or something like milk, or for vegans, it could be like a slice of cucumber or a watermelon. That could bring down the Vata, that could bring down Pitta to balance. Coconut water, another great drink to bring down Pitta balance. Pitta imbalance, sorry. Kapha imbalance can be brought down by something like honey. So have a cup of tea. When the tea has cooled down a little bit, have a teaspoon of honey in it. Honey is great for Kapha. And for somebody who has all three going out of balance all at once, which some of us do, then all we need to do is take a little bit of sesame oil, take a little bit of ghee, and take a little bit of honey, mix it all together and have that, and voila, all three balanced.
Thank you so much for that quick tip. I'm sure that's going to be helpful, even though there is quite a bit to learn. Doshas and the food, that's a good start. Okay, we have Avish Karamar. Sorry, I couldn't read that. Okay, he's consuming amla powder or juice, and Giloy empty stomach is fine or not? Amla juice and Giloy.
No. First thing in the morning, please drink a little bit of hot water or some light tea, not even like a very strong brewed tea, some light tea, whether you want to do it black or whether it's herbal tea. Start with that. Unless you had a health concern and an Ayurveda Vaidya has said to drink all this, then it makes sense. Otherwise, just start with plain hot water. The first flush that kind of cleans the body out should be just plain hot water or a very light brewed tea.
Okay, that's nice. Let's see if you have any other question. There's a question on thyroid, food thyroid. I just really remember. Can you talk about that, Salila? The food. I mean, these are just very high level information you could share, even though I'm sure there are specifics into getting into thyroid, hypo, and different degrees of it. But
yeah, right. You know,
just for
unless
the
you
sake,
know, right. So when you say thyroid hypo, it means that the pitta is down. Your metabolic processes are a little bit like the brakes are on them a little bit. So they're not functioning as much. So now you need to bring some sun, spices, steam into the body to kickstart that metabolism. When you say hyperthyroid, it means that you're like a car on a highway going at like 100 miles an hour. You know, you are too fast. Everything's burning up in your body. Now you got to hit the brakes and calm it down. You got to bring more kapha producing foods. So slimy foods like fenugreek, urad dal, seaweed. These are all the foods that will cool you down and calm you down and ground you.
so we are going back to the doshas, right? I think that's going to be important in Ayurveda, and understanding whatever disease or conditions we have, and understanding what dosha is in balance, out of balance, and then the food according to that dosha, or increasing or decreasing or balancing that dosha is going to be the way to solve issues or conditions in Ayurveda. That's really nice to understand that it's you, all you need to know is those doshas and what happens in a particular condition. Is the pitta going up, like you just mentioned about thyroid, or it's coming down, and then accordingly the food would make sense. Okay, food and lifestyle for night shift workers, people who work.
Yeah, I had a client who was a night shift worker, and I think I influenced him to drop his night shift. That's what happens.
You didn't advise on food, but you had to stop working in the night.
You know, the first principle of Ayurveda is to live according to the sun. We have to wake up with the sun and go to sleep with the sun. So if you're doing a night shift, we are doing the exact opposite. Then what we have invited is disease. And then life becomes a constant battle against this disease. So, the basic principle of Ayurveda: rise with the sun, sleep with the sun, eat according to the sun, fast according to the moon on the Ekadashis, cleanse according to the solstices, the Navaratras, the spring cleanse and the fall cleanse. That's based on our solstices. And then as the seasons change from one to another, during the cusp of the seasons, shift from one diet to the next kind of diet. So this is what is the framework that holds health up for someone who is a newbie. So going against that is again now inviting disease.
Anshul, I hope you heard that. Of course, I mean, it's tough call, but I think that's the best way to.
Yeah, Anshul, I'm sorry to batter you. Yeah, Anshul, World Health Organization has called night shift a carcinogen. You don't need to wait for World Health Organization to say that.
Yes. Nat has a question. Savory Ayurvedic breakfast ideas.
Khichdi, number one.
Okay.
And then the other one I really like is I like to make like a congee. I call it my longevity congee. I just take everything in the house, like all kinds of different pulses, rices, jujubes, dates, nuts. I boil it all together, and then I have it with a little bit of ginger and a little bit of salt and ghee. Or now I have it with sesame. So that is another. Anything that is porridgey, pongal is a great Ayurvedic breakfast. Anything that is porridgey, light, those are all great savory breakfasts.
Fantastic. And like you mentioned earlier, going back to our ancestral food, I think, could you mention a few things that comes to your mind when you say my grandmother used to eat this? And I'm sure different regions have different breakfasts, but that's like a very simple rule to follow. So what would you say about breakfast?
In my grandma's home?
Yes.
It would be kanji. It would be kanji.
Oh, and every day?
Not every day. I don't quite, well, I have to think back. I have to take a minute. Well, in many in Kerala families, they don't have breakfast. Or what I'm remembering is that, grandpa would have like a lunch in the morning. It would be like a brunch, and then he would head out to work. And we children would get things like puttu and rice and things like that. But I think she had congee. She was having, I wouldn't see her eating something solid. I don't remember seeing her do that. How was it for your grandparents? Do you remember that?
My grandparents the same farming community, so they had ragi balls. If you know ragi balls from South India, that's something they
Yeah.
had. And like you mentioned, it could either be early in the morning if they had to go to the field and they had a long, work in the field during a certain time of the year,
Yeah.
or they would have a slightly later brunch time, but
Right.
still have
Right.
a. I mean, sometimes ragi, uh, you know. Uh, porridgey, like you mentioned,
Mhm.
but the time it was ragi ball, as I remember my grandparents eating that most of the time.
Super healthy food, ragi balls. We have such a robust cuisine from Karnataka as well, where it's essential that every week you have ragi balls.
Yes, yes, every day, of course. I mean, almost, and in some farm communities, almost all meals are ragi balls, and so very little rice they eat. Um, okay, I had one question. Hot water with lime. Quick
Mhm.
answer to that.
Very interesting question, because this is like such a fad, right? Everybody start your day with hot water and lemon. So the thing I say is that it's good for a certain time in the year when the kapha is heavy in the air, when it's more watery in the air, when it's raining, when it's cold. This makes sense to have a drying drink in the morning, because lemon is drying, hot water is slightly drying. So but if the weather is vata outside, you can't have a drink that is also aggravating vata inside. And how you know that is you'll start to feel emptiness around your heart. You'll start to feel this thing called hriddaha, where the heart region starts to feel like it's empty, and it's, there's slight pain there. So that is like the first flag saying that if you continue on this path, you will get acidity. So stop. So you can't have the same thing every day all throughout the year and claim that you are healthy. It's not possible.
Got it. Makes sense. Okay, we have. Can we mix fruits with vegan yogurt?
I am strictly against vegan yogurts because they are made from nuts that are artificially fermented. Or, coconut milk is artificially fermented. If God did not want to ferment those things, if we ferment them, we only have data from this one generation that it's going to work out long term. We have data from 50,000 generations of what works. There are so many beautiful vegan options existing within our Indian cuisine that we should be actually eating.
Okay. Congested gallbladder, getting. I mean, of course, a little medical issues, but if you have anything
Congested
top of
gallbladder,
mind,
yeah,
share.
first, it's important because it's one of the most common surgeries that is performed. So if you have a congested gallbladder, that means that you have over abused oily foods in your lifetime, oily fried foods within your lifetime, because the gallbladder has little packets of enzymes, just like a washing machine has little packets of washing powder. If the more oily and dense, heavy foods we put in our body, the more enzymes the body will produce. And then the gallbladder is kind of a reservoir for keeping all that excess enzymes. So if we have a congested gallbladder, it means that we've taken a little too many liberties, and now we must absolutely stop eating heavy, dense, fatty, deep fried, processed dinners. We should stick with congee. So looks like congee is the word throughout this topic. This talk should be titled congee.
Ganji, we say in
Uh-huh.
our home. Ganji, so I think that's the same you're
Uh-huh.
talking
Yeah,
about, I
yeah.
guess. Yeah, you should title it Conversation on Ganji. Shobha Mehta says, very good conversation. Thank you, Shobha. I think that's how many questions I could see. Kanji recipe, that's for you, Salila. Kanji recipe.
Kanji recipe, it's already
just
on
one
my
more
Instagram.
question. Is there a Okay, one more question. Is there a diet in Ayurveda that could detoxify the body after alcoholic consumption?
Yes, Panchakarma will be best for you if you have if there's toxicity in the body because of alcohol drinking, then yes, Panchakarma is the best. Reach out to me. I'm happy to refer you to a center.
All right, I think we are about time. Thank you, Salila. Keep talking to you. I think we should have more conversation. I know this is not enough time to talk about food. It is like probably needs many such episodes just to touch upon the basic principles of food. But it was fantastic talking to you, and coming from someone who has her roots in Ayurveda and not so much of academic study, but even though that is important, but I'm saying, it was a nice conversation to have from what parents and grandparents did at home and how we need to be aware, maybe adapt, not simply follow whatever they did, but just know what they did and maybe figure out certain principles and readapt to our situation, circumstances, and applying it. That makes total sense, and that's a really good first step for all of us, and it's an easy first step. There's no excuse to say that it's too complicated, I'm not going to start on Ayurvedic food. And like you also mentioned, Indian diet is already pretty much set on Ayurvedic principles, so you really don't have to go too far. All we have to do is just know what we eat, say on a festival, and because most of us eat, ancestral food on a festival, a feast would be mostly that, right? A combination of food. I think that's where we need to go back and find our roots and get it back and maybe adapt, like I was saying, adapt it to our modern needs. So this conversation was very useful. It was very interesting for me, and I'm sure a lot of them expressed interest as well. Thank you all for being live with us and asking questions, appreciating, as well as looking forward. Asking for more. So we will look forward to having more such conversations. Thank you all. Namaste.
Such an honor. Thank you.
Thank you.